Done. Okay, it's
Hello
done.
and hello and welcome. I'm Rabbi Jeffrey Sachs of the Web Yeshiva, and I just wanted to take a moment before we turn the microphone over to our teacher, Rabbi Mark Smilowitz, to welcome everyone to our new Machshava Mastery program, which follows on the heels of our long-time successful Halacha Mastery program. And the program really is modeled very much along those lines. I know some of you are graduates of the Halacha Mastery program or are currently participants in it, so you know how this works. And I also know that many of you are brand new to Web Yeshiva. So a special welcome to you, and please use the opportunity to visit all of our many other offerings on Web Yeshiva, most of which, of course, are free of tuition. So you can co-enroll both in this program as well as all of our other offerings at WebYeshiva.org. Since some of you are new to the program, I would just mention you should keep the contact details for our tech support, our faithful tech support. His name is Ezra. You would think that we made up that name, but in fact, he came to the job because perhaps his name guided him in that direction to be of help and support to all of us. If you have any trouble during a class, getting onto a class, accessing course material afterwards, and particularly all of you that may be listening to this at some point in the future through the recordings, because not everyone in the course is able to participate synchronously live. Some of you will be listening to this an hour after it's over or a day after it's over. And indeed, some of you will be listening to this long in the future, in times to come. You'll be much smarter than we are because you'll be standing on the shoulders of all of our experience. But if you should ever need help, contact us for tech support through Web Yeshiva. I just want to thank everyone here on the Web Yeshiva team for everything that was required to get this new initiative off the ground. It's something we've been thinking of for a long time. So special thanks to our friends, Rabbi Johnny Solomon, Ezra Hurwitz of our tech support, and our support staff in the office, Amichai Tzipor and Michal Haber, all of whom you may have been in touch with. And they're always here ready to aid and guide in anything we can do at Web Yeshiva. I would really, really encourage everyone who's participating, particularly those of you that are able to join us synchronously live every Sunday at 6 p.m. Jerusalem time, or whatever your local time is, wherever you are, to really get engaged and to participate. There's a challenge with online learning because we're not all gathered around the same table as might be ideal, even though, of course, the great advantage is that we're able to gather people together from all over the world and from all different backgrounds and experiences to learn together. But that's only really valuable if we do use the interactiveness of the platform. So again, if you have a webcam, please turn it on. It really does enhance the experience, but it also a little bit makes each of us more accountable for the learning that's going on during this one live interactive hour. In the chat box right now, you can just say a word of hello, let us know who you are and where you're joining us from, and that way we can all start to get to know each other. After all, we'll be spending this semester and indeed maybe the next year or two learning together. So in the chat box, you can let us know where you are and where you're joining us from. And of course, you're welcome to participate in the talks and to listen passively or to listen to the recordings. But we really, really do encourage people to make an investment of time outside of this 1 hour of learning to do the readings, to ask the questions, to follow up with Rabbi Smilowitz, who will be available to you and responsive to your questions and your comments and your critiques. And you can get in touch with him through his email. We've set up a WhatsApp group just for this course. If you're not on it, you will get, or you will have gotten a link to join that WhatsApp group for interactive discussion amongst yourselves, the kind of conversation that would be taking place in the Beit Midrash or in the Hadar Ochel, the cafeteria, were this a brick and mortar yeshiva, not a web yeshiva, or around the water cooler or the coffee stand. And we encourage you to be doing that and to speaking with each other. And we'll be exposed to all types of ideas and thoughts and writings and thinkers, and you'll bring your own experiences to that, and you will have interesting things that you've read that you'll want to share with people, and we encourage you to do that the same way that we would if we were in fact all together sitting around one table. So isn't this wonderful? Look, people are logging in from Netanya and from Yerushalayim and from Poland and from the west coast of California and even from distant West Orange, New Jersey. And we welcome our special listener from West Orange, New Jersey, who has a lot invested in this particular course, and we're glad that she's here. Finally, I would just say that we're here to explore the depths of Jewish thought. And unlike halacha mastery, where we really do try to get to the bottom line halacha, but very much like our halacha mastery program, where we're all invested in this principally for a sense of personal achievement. When we began the halacha mastery program, it was with an eye towards giving people the confidence to be competent balebatim, competent masters of their own home, mothers, fathers who want to be able to answer their children's questions or their own questions. Because a competent Jew should know what to do with the milk spoon that fell into the meat pot, and should also know which kinds of questions need to be fed up the food chain to a rabbi that are more complex. But a competent Jew should also know what to do if tonight is Rosh Chodesh. What if I forget to say Ya'aleh V'yavo? These are things that a learned person should be able to handle and field for himself. So too in the realm of Jewish thought. But unlike in the realm of psak halacha, knowing whether or not this piece of meat is kosher or not, whether or not I have to repeat Birkat HaMazon if I forgot to say Ya'aleh V'yavo or not, the world of Jewish thought operates with its own sense of integrity and its own set of principles. And I would say that unlike the realm of psak halacha, in the realm of Jewish thought, the most authentic idea is that we're going to talk about it. We're going to argue about it. We're going to debate it. And the topics that the Rambam was debating 800 years ago, we're still thinking about, we're still wrestling with, and we're still trying to make sense of, particularly as those ancient ideas still have force and meaning to us in modernity. It's the most authentically Jewish form of learning. I recently have been studying Yiddish, and there's that most evocative of all Jewish phrases. Von a kasha starbt man nicht. You don't die from a question. But the Jewish people have suffered over the years from not asking enough questions. And that's what we're here to do. And that's what our great instructor is here to do. And just as a personal side note, I would add that I've been pursuing Rabbi Smilowitz for many years to get involved in what we're doing at WebYeshiva and to teach for us. And I'm glad it's finally come to pass, because in my 4+ decades of close daily friendship with him, he's probably the person more than anyone else that I have consistently wrestled with about ideas and argued with about ideas and debated with about ideas and learned the most from about the ideas that you will now have the privilege and pleasure of studying with him. So without taking up any more time, I turn it over to you, our friend Rabbi Mark Smilowitz, Rabbi Dr. Mark Smilowitz, a musmach of Yeshiva University and a doctorate in Jewish philosophy from the Hebrew University, and an all-around expert in the topics that we'll be exploring. And we're very glad that you're here on the inaugural night of the Machshava Mastery Program to inaugurate our journey together. So there you go, Rabbi Smilowitz. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Sachs. It's a great honor to be here. Today is the 18th of January, 2026. I'm Rabbi Mark Smilowitz. This is lesson 1 of the course, Ikkarei HaEmunah, Foundations of Faith, for the Machshava Mastery Program of WebYeshiva. So the course is called Ikkarei HaEmunah, and already immediately we have a problem, which is how to translate that term. The course was translated on the webpage as Foundations of Faith, but there are other ways to translate the word Ikkar. An Ikkar can be translated as a foundation, or it could be translated as a principle. And there's a difference. I'm not going to say what the difference is now, but you can think about it. We're going to get to that a little bit later. The term emunah could be translated as faith, or it could be translated as belief. And I think that there's a difference there as well. And we'll get to that a little bit later. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, just giving you a flavor of what's to come. Before we get into the topic, I want to reiterate what Rabbi Sachs said. I'd like to invite you all to use your microphones to ask me questions. I believe you're able to unmute yourselves. Is that correct? I think so. I'm seeing some nods. Good.
And that's
Okay. When
correct.
you have a Good. So when you have a question, please ask. I may not be able to take all questions right away, but I do want to know what you're thinking, and I want to know how you're processing what we are learning together, because we are learning together as a group, and I don't want to feel lonely during this process. And that's another reason why having your cameras on is very helpful. I also should announce that for all of those who are doing the Machshava Mastery Program as a whole, and not just this course today, there will be a test at the end of this course. It will be a combination of short answers asking you to identify significant concepts or terms that we've discussed, and some essay questions asking you to explain some of the broader ideas that will appear again and again during the course. I just want to tell you a little bit about who I am. Rabbi Sachs already mentioned a couple of things about my ordination from Yeshiva University, my doctorate from the university, from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. I also studied for a number of years in Yeshivat Har Etzion under Rav Aharon Lichtenstein and Rabbi Yehuda Amital, and some of their work appears on our reading in our course Reader. I've been a teacher for over 20 years in high schools and seminaries in New Jersey, Seattle, and Israel. My family moved to Israel, to Beit Shemesh in 2005. And in the middle of my teaching career, I decided to study Jewish philosophy. And I first received a master's degree at Michlelet Herzog in Alon Shvut, and then went on to the doctoral program in Hebrew University. The biography I'm telling you is not just personal; it's actually part of the content, because one of the interesting things that's pertinent in my biography to this course is that when I grew up in New Jersey, Jewish studies programs in America did not place much of a value on the study of Jewish thought or Jewish philosophy. Of course, important Jewish ideas were discussed, but not in a systematic fashion, and not generally through the classical works of Jewish philosophy. I can tell you that I went through 12 years of Jewish day school, as well as yeshiva college, as well as rabbinic ordination and graduate school in Jewish education. And I don't recall, perhaps I'm mistaken, but I don't recall ever having to open up a Kuzari or a Moreh Nevuchim, two classic works of medieval Jewish philosophy. In Israel, that's not the case. High school students in Israel have a Machshevet Yisrael curriculum, a Jewish thought curriculum, and they do study passages from the classical works of Jewish thought. By the way, there's a difference between calling it Jewish thought and Jewish philosophy. I don't have time to get into it now, but you can think about that. It's an interesting question. Why the two cultures have this different, America versus Israel, or really English-speaking countries versus Israel, is also a discussion for another time I'm not going to get into. But my hope is that this Machshevet Mastery program with WebYeshiva will open up an avenue of study that has largely been neglected in English language Jewish education. With that introduction, I want to get right into the material. Let's get into the topic. For the moment, we're going to define Ikkarei Emunah as a little bit differently than the title of the English title of this class. We'll call them principles of belief. And immediately, a very important question arises. Do we have principles of belief? Does Judaism have principles of belief? Some have argued that what's unique about Judaism is that it's not about belief at all. It's about action. Judaism is all about mitzvot, and it's about halacha. Believe what you want, they will say, as long as you perform the commandments. This is sometimes called orthoprax as opposed to orthodox, practice versus doctrine. There are some religious Jews who tend to be associated with this idea. The most famous one is Moses Mendelssohn, who is often cited as saying that Judaism has no doctrines, no prescribed beliefs. Now, I've read Mendelssohn. He was an 18th century Jew who was a very significant and influential philosopher. Personally, I don't think that's what Mendelssohn meant to say. And my reading of him is that there is no officially authoritative formulation of what Jews have to believe, the way that we have officially authoritative formulations of what we have to do. But certainly Mendelssohn knew that Jews had to believe certain things in order for the mitzvot to make sense. But that's not a discussion we could get into today. For whatever reason, Mendelssohn has become associated with the view that Judaism has no doctrines. Two other halachically observant Jew and Orthodox Jews who have suggested that Judaism is not too concerned with what you believe and is mainly concerned with what you do are Yeshayahu Leibovitz and Menachem Kellner. Kellner wrote a book called Must a Jew Believe Anything? A very interesting book where he argues that Judaism has no requirement for believing any fixed set of propositions. Now, the idea I want to address this argument that some people make, who say that Judaism is about action and not about belief. The idea that Judaism is more about deed than about creed can emerge, especially when we contrast Judaism with Christianity. In Christianity, one is saved from purgatory through belief alone. Judaism, on the other hand, according to the way most people understand it, requires us to earn our way to heaven through our actions. This difference between Christianity and Judaism is often called works versus faith. Works versus faith. But one has to be careful not to let this contrast turn into a caricature. Yes, Judaism emphasizes action, perhaps more than belief, but that does not mean that it dismisses beliefs as unimportant. What happens when we look at the classical sources before the modern era? So one place to turn is the first Rashi on the Torah. And this is my first time trying to share something. And let's see if I get it right here. Sharing a PowerPoint. I want you to see this. These sources are all in your course reader. And I'm not going to read this is a famous Rashi. You can all see the Rashi on your screens, I hope. You can turn on your mics for a second just to say yes.
Yeah, we see it.
It's clear.
Okay,
See it quite clearly.
Excellent. Okay. So this is a famous Rashi where he cites a midrash that asks a very basic question. Why does the Torah start with the creation of the world? It should instead have started with the first mitzvah. And Rashi's answer to this question is well known. It's not so important for our studies right now. It has to do with our claim to the promised land. Since God created the world, he owns all the land, and that's the source of our claim that we can make a claim to the land. I'm not so interested in the answer, but the question itself is very important because the question seems to treat Judaism as all deed and no creed. The idea that the Torah should start with the first mitzvah and skip over the story of creation certainly sounds this way. And none other than Maimonides, the Ramban, noticed this, and he asks on this midrash. He presents a challenge, and this is what he writes. I'll read this source here. I'm going to read it in English just to save time. I invite people to look at the course reader if you want to see his original Hebrew language. I mean, it's here on the screen, but on your own time, you could look at it as well. Ramban says that this is a homiletic exposition as quoted by Rashi in his commentaries, but one may object that it was indeed very necessary to begin the Torah with the chapter of Bereshit bara Elokim, in the beginning God created, for this is the root of faith. In Hebrew, ki hu shoresh ha'emunah. And he who does not believe in this and thinks the world was eternal denies the essential principle of the Judaic religion and has no Torah at all. The term in Hebrew, he's kofer be'ikar ve'ein lo Torah klal. So the Ramban ends up reinterpreting this midrash and reinterprets the question that's not asking really why did the Torah start with creation. Of course the Torah started with creation. That's a basic fundamental of faith. Really, the midrash was asking why did it include so many details about the creation that we find difficult to understand, and he takes the midrash in a different direction. But you see clearly from the Ramban, who was, and this is, I'm saying Ramban with an N at the end, not to be confused with Rambam with an M at the end. Two different people, Nachmanides, we're talking about, not Maimonides. We'll get to Maimonides soon. But Nachmanides was a prominent rabbinic authority in the Middle Ages, and he clearly felt that Judaism does indeed have a faith component that defines the religion, and that denial of these faith components is tantamount to denial of the entire Torah. And it's not even clear that Rashi argues with him. The question in the Midrash cited by Rashi is just a hypothetical. It says the Torah, why didn't the Torah start with the first mitzvah? But it didn't. The Torah didn't start with the first mitzvah, and there are all sorts of lessons that one can learn from the fact that the Torah did not start with the first commandment. And Rashi cites one of the lessons, but there could be other lessons. So Rashi's not necessarily even arguing with the Ramban. There is one Rishon, one medieval Jewish authority, who deserves discussion because he seems to reject the idea of listing specific Jewish beliefs that we have to believe, and that person is the Abravanel. But we're going to see that even the Abravanel agrees with the idea that Judaism is not just about action, but also demands specific beliefs. We're going to study what the Abravanel has to say, I think, in about 2 weeks. This is just a foreshadow of what's to come. But the question of is Judaism a religion of belief or of deed, the entire question is overshadowed by one historical figure, because there's one source that historically has dominated the playing field of the question of Jewish belief, such that when Jews speak of principles of faith, they usually have this one source in mind. And of course, I'm talking about Maimonides, the Rambam, who listed 13 principles of faith. And that's why the Rambam's list and his formulation will be the centerpiece of this course. The Rambam's list became so dominant that it appears in our prayer books in our siddur as part of the morning service in 2 different forms. In my shul growing up in West Orange, New Jersey, we used to sing Yigdal on Friday night after shul at the end of davening. And Yigdal is a poem, a liturgical poem that is a restatement of the Rambam's 13 principles of faith. The Rambam did not write Yigdal. It's a poetic and liturgical summary written by someone else. I am not a historian. I identify more with the conceptual aspects of philosophy. For me, names, you tell me them, they go in one ear, they go out the other ear. So I read the name of the person who wrote Yigdal, but I don't know. I've already lost it. You could look it up on Wikipedia, I'm sure. Also, besides Yigdal, the 13 Ani Ma'amins that appear in the siddur after morning service, after Shacharit, those were not written by the Rambam. That was somebody else's summary, a poetic summary of the 13 principles of the Rambam. The most famous one is the one that was made into a song with a number of different tunes, Ani Ma'amin be'emunah shlema beviat HaMashiach. But keep in mind that those were not the Rambam's original words. And there are some subtle differences between the Rambam's original version and the versions written by later figures. We will later in the course discuss, highlight and discuss some of those differences. I want to jump to the list of the Rambam's beliefs and talk about them a little bit. But first, I want to pause if there are any questions or anyone has anything. Actually, someone wrote here something in the, let me just read this here. Rambam's objection only accounts if the non-Jew was a philosopher. Most non-Jews did believe in theogony, and the difference was that there is one. Okay. All right. Interesting. I have to think about that. Nathan, thank you. Nathan, do you want to explain your question? You don't have to, but if you'd like to, you can.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Hi. First, sorry for the French accent.
We love it. Don't apologize. We love the French accent.
It was not.
Is it okay that I'm
really,
drinking water and not wine? I just want to make sure that's okay.
You are supposed to not drink because you know Moreh Derech can be. I mean, Moreh Halacha can be chatouille. So
very good.
yeah.
Well said. Okay.
No, it was only an objection. I mean, the Ramban is polemicizing with philosophers. The Genesis account was only written because in the polytheistic Canaanite environment, it was important to say that there is only one God. I mean, this is already a reading of a very ancient tenet. And yeah, of course, we had to believe that we are like the Kuzari says, the people that God came to take out of Egypt. It was not really a tenet, but it was a creed we all shared, or we wouldn't be Bnei Israel.
Correct. And we're going to get into soon. You mentioned the idea of polemicizing against counter-Jewish beliefs, and that is one function of listing principles. And we're going to talk about other functions of listing principles. We will get to that soon. Thank you for your comment. Tzvi asked, where are the reading sources on the web page of the course? There's a list of lessons. So in lesson 1, there should be a link to the PDF of the course reader. So if you go to the web page of the course, you should find it there. Okay. So now let's get to the list of the Rambam. Let me see here. I'm going back to my. All right, sharing the PowerPoint. Okay, so this is my list. This is not the Rambam's words. This is, besides Yigdal and Ani Maamin, you now have Rabbi Smilowitz's summary but this is basically a list of the Rambam's 13 principles of faith. I'm not going to go through each one today. I do hope that by the end of the course, you will know them by heart if you don't already know them. But I want to deal with them today as a whole. We need to talk about where the Rambam got this list from. But first, I want to mention a couple of things about the list. First of all, I mentioned earlier that the word emunah could be translated as faith or as belief. And I said there's a difference between the two. What did I mean by that? They could be synonymous, but faith often carries with it a certain emotional component. Faith is often synonymous with trust. And having faith in God might simply mean that I rely on God, I trust in God. Emunah, a belief, can mean that, but it also can often mean a proposition that is true, agreement with a proposition that is true. So whereas faith might be more of an emotional connection to God and relying on God, the principles of belief that the Rambam's talking about are statements that you're expected to agree with. God exists, God is one, God has no body. So that's why it might be better to translate the course as principles of belief instead of foundations of faith. But either one is fine, because these are subtleties in the words, and they can either word could mean either thing. But I just want to point out that subtleties sometimes make a difference. Okay. But I want to ask two questions about this list of 13 principles of the Rambam. Question number one is, what are they? And question number two is, what are they for? Now, when I ask, what are they, I'm referring back to the first question I asked during this lesson, which is how to translate Ikkarim. Do you translate Ikkarim as principles or as foundations? Now, I'm going to click a slide here. Okay. This next slide is source number 4 in your course reader. And this is the place where the Rambam lists his principles. They're in his introduction to the chapter 10 of Masechet Sanhedrin. The Rambam wrote an introduction to the Mishnah. He wrote a commentary on the Mishnah, and in a couple of places he gave a lengthy introduction. In the chapter 10 of the Mishnah of Sanhedrin, he gives a lengthy introduction where he goes into these principles. And the words the Rambam uses here are I'll read it in Hebrew. Ikkarei datenu v'yesodoteha 13 yesodot. The fundamental beliefs and the foundational principles of our religion are 13 principles. The Rambam uses both words. He uses ikar, which is translated here as a fundamental, foundation, which translated as principles, and yesodot, which are foundations. Now, here I need to say, does anyone know what language the Rambam wrote this in, his commentary on the Mishnah? You can pipe in if somebody wants to call out the answer.
Arabic.
He did. He wrote it in Arabic. Yes. So I don't know Arabic, unfortunately. I'm relying on Hebrew translations and English translations. What I try to do, because I don't know Arabic, is to check a number of different translations. But he used both terms, yesodot and ikarim, which most likely one of them means, yesodot means foundations, ikarim means principles. But now let's ask the question, what's the difference between a principle and a foundation? So let me go to the next slide here, if I may. Okay. So I'd like to suggest that at least my understanding is that a principle is an overarching rule for achieving some purpose, but the overall area of knowledge covered by these principles, it does not necessarily depend on any one of the principles. Whereas foundations are pillars that hold up an entire structure. And if you remove one of the foundations, then the entire structure collapses. So now let's understand what we're talking about if we're talking about principles or foundations. If the Rambam's list is 13 foundations of Jewish belief, then what the Rambam is saying is that these are beliefs that if any one of them is removed, then the entire Torah falls. The Torah will no longer make any sense. On the other hand, if they're not foundations, but they're principles, then it's possible that the religion would still make sense without one of them, even if it's something that we are required to believe. So if the Rambam calls the Ikkarim yesodot, if he calls them foundations, it sounds like he's saying these are 13 ideas, propositions, that if you remove any one of them, the entire Torah falls. However, calling them foundations sparked some critique and discussion among some of the Spanish Rishonim about 100 years after the Rambam. Interestingly, these Rishonim all belong to the Beit Medrash of the Ran, Rabbeinu Nisim, but we're not going to talk about that so much now. We're going to learn about their critiques. I think it's in 2 weeks, in 2 more lessons. I just want to give you one example orally right now. Rav Chastai Kreskas, a very important figure in medieval Jewish philosophy who's generally not known in the Jewish world because even though he was a great rabbi and a great religious and spiritual leader, his halachic writings simply did not survive. But his philosophical writings did. And Rav Chasdai Kreskas says that if the Rambam meant to lay down principles that Jews must believe, then his list should have been larger than 13. He says there's more than 13 things that Jews have to believe. On the other hand, if the Rambam meant to list 13 foundations such that if you remove any one of them, the Torah falls, then he says the Rambam's list is too small. Excuse me, did I say it wrong? I'm going to say it again. Start over again, okay? Let me say it again, because I like this formula. It's a very important formulation of Rav Chasdai. Rav Chasdai said that if the Rambam meant to list principles that you have to believe, then his list is too small, because there's more than 13 you need to believe. But if he's listing foundations that these are the pillars that the entire religion stands on, such that you can't remove any of them without losing the whole Torah, then his list is too big. Because there are, for example, if we removed the concept of Mashiach from Judaism, would that mean there's no such thing as Judaism anymore? It's an interesting question to think about. We're going to get back to it. Some people might say yes, without Mashiach, there's nothing. I know certain groups of people that would say that if you removed it, there would be no Judaism. But Rav Chasdai thought that the Rambam's list is confusing because if it's principles, it's too small, and if it's foundations, then it's too big. So that's why this is an important question. But this also, I can only just touch on that issue. As I said, in about 2 weeks, we're going to get more into that and the other Rishonim who critique the Rambam on this issue. So I'm going to leave this question right now as an open question to think about. What are the 13 principles? Are they the logical foundations such that the Torah is inconceivable without them? Or are they the list of things that we as Jews are required to believe? Okay. Are there any questions on that point about what are the 13 principles? Again, it's an open question right now. I'm not answering it, but just I want to make sure the question is understood. Mark Tarragon, do you want to explain your question? It looks interesting.
Well, I'm having trouble with your terminology. When you say something doesn't make sense or the Torah falls, it sounds like we're right, it's wrong, and I think it should be backwards. It's more, we should be struggling to understand and to better believe or etc. It's not that something like, it's not if you could disprove one of the 13 principles, doesn't mean that's it, no more Judaism, there's no Torah. It means we misunderstood something.
Yeah, I'm not talking about disproving the principles. If the 13 principles are foundations, what the Rambam is saying is that these are 13 principles such that not worthy to be disproved. He doesn't feel like we're in danger of that happening. But if you showed me somebody who didn't believe one of them, then I would say that person is not following Judaism. That person, whatever religion they're doing, isn't Judaism, because if you pull one of these out, then it becomes a different religion. Does that?
You're saying it's definitional, not.
Yes, it defines the religion. That's the point. If they're foundations, then they define the religion. Okay. If they're principles, they don't necessarily define it. They are simply rules that of what Jews must believe. Does that make sense? Okay.
May I?
Yes, please.
We know that the Karaites had the same tenets, and we didn't really consider them like orthodoxies, by the least. So
say that again. Who had? I just misheard you. Who had what?
Karaim,
the Karaim, yes.
Yeah.
The Karaites.
אשכול הכופר של יהודה הדסי. He says plus or minus the same plus the mitzvah to know Hebrew. And we didn't the fact that they were still minim. I mean, the Rambam says that he who doesn't la, but even he who believes all of them can still be a min
Who believes all of what?
of the Ikarim.
You're telling, okay, so the word min, for those who are not familiar, a min is a Hebrew term referring to a heretic. And Nathan is saying that the Rambam pointed to the group of Karaites and called them heretics, even though they may have believed in the 13 principles. Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying that the Rambam said that, but even though they did believe the same things, but they acted differently because you said about deed and creed and all these things.
Well, I thought, Nathan, that the Karaites did not believe in the oral law, in the transmission of the Torah Shebe'al Peh, and that actually is on the Rambam's list. It's not on the list I showed you, but if you read the Rambam's expansion of what it means to believe in principle number, I think it's number 7, the Torah comes from heaven. It includes that the oral law. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, John Fast asked, is there a difference between fundamentals and foundations? You're right. It's not called foundations of faith. Good point. It's called fundamentals of faith. Thank you for calling me out on that. I'm using the two words synonymously. I don't see much of a difference between them. But for precision, you are right. Okay. Okay. So Yoel is asking, yeah, Yoel is asking about the formulation be'emunah shlema. I must believe that Jews must believe in these principles with perfect faith. So, what does that mean? Perfect faith. So that's not Maimonides' language. The Rambam didn't write that. It's a poetic language, and I'm not prepared to address. I'll think about it. I'm not prepared to address it today, but for today, I would say that that's just not the Rambam's language. He didn't talk that way. But it's an interesting question. Okay.
Can I ask something?
Yes, please.
Just to address Nathan's question, really. Let's say, forget the Karaites, but if somebody were to believe in all 13 principles, but let's say not follow the mitzvah, where would that put him in terms of how the Rambam defines it? Is it all inclusive? Like you have to believe, in all of these, and then that's enough to define you as a Jew? Or is that just the basic? And then from there, we have all the other things.
Excellent question, Ricky. We're actually going to get to that very soon. We're going to get to that very soon, and I will try to remember to point out that this was Ricky's question. Okay, so yes, thank you for asking it. But before that, I want to ask a different question. Not what are the principles, but what are they for? Meaning, what is their function? What was the Rambam's purpose in writing them? What was he out to achieve by listing them? And I mean, beyond their obvious usefulness in organizing Jewish beliefs just for conceptual purposes, so we have a handle on what Judaism is about. What is the significance of these principles? And I have in mind 2 or 3 additional purposes that this list might serve, and you'll see that that is actually it actually becomes clear from the Rambam. He had some purposes in mind. So this question is, I just put up another slide, what is their function? And I mentioned, well, one is conceptual organization. It's just useful to be able to encapsulate all of all of Judaism into a formula. But there are other functions of the 13 principles, and one of them is what I like to call identity. Having a list of principles allows us to cement our own religious identity. For psychological and emotional reasons, I need to know who I am and what I believe. And this is particularly important when I'm challenged or pressured by people outside of my group. If I am not clear on what I must believe to be a committed Jew, I might find myself ready to give up aspects of my Jewish identity unwittingly. I might drop beliefs that make me uncomfortable in order to fit in better with society without realizing that in doing so, I'm leaving the Jewish faith. So having a list helps me to know where I draw the red lines not to cross. The purpose of the list then would be to strengthen my own religious identity. And I mention this because the Rambam historically used his principles of faith that way in a letter that he wrote to the Jewish community of Yemen. This letter is referred to in Hebrew as the Ikkarei Teiman. In English, it's referred to as the Epistle to Yemen. An epistle is just the word letter with a PhD. In the late 1100s, the Jewish community of Yemen. Let me just close this for a second here. In the late 1100s, the Jewish community of Yemen was facing a crisis of pressure to abandon their Jewish religion from a number of sources. One source of pressure was the local Islamic ruler who was forcing Jews to convert to Islam. On top of that, there was a Jewish man claiming to be Mashiach and drawing Jewish followers to him and convincing them to abandon traditional Judaism because he had a better version. The Jews were also suffering under a very heavy tax burden. And under these circumstances, many Jews felt pressured to leave their faith and to join Islam. A Jewish religious leader of Yemen sent a letter to the Rambam asking for help. And the Rambam, to help the community, wrote a letter to Yemen with the purpose of strengthening their faith, to strengthen the faith of the entire Yemenite community, and to help them resist the temptation to abandon Judaism. Eventually, the Rambam was able to influence the Sultan Saladin to end the persecution. And I want you to see how the Rambam uses his principles of faith to help strengthen the identity of the Yemenite Jewish community. So I have here the Epistle to Yemen. It's also in your source books. It's source number 3. This was written in Arabic. This was a letter that the Rambam wrote to an Arabic-speaking population. So he wrote it in Arabic. So I have no problem reading this in English because the Hebrew's no more original than the English. As I read this, pay attention to what principles of faith you see coming up in the Rambam's letter. Now, my co-religionists in the diaspora, it behooves you to hearten one another, the elders to guide the youth, and the leaders to direct the masses. Give your assent to the truth that is immutable and unchangeable, and to the following postulates of a religion that shall never fail. God is one in a unique sense of the term, and Moses is his prophet and spokesman, and the greatest and most perfect of the seers. To him was vouchsafed by God what has never been vouchsafed to any prophet before him, nor will it be in the future. The entire Torah was divinely revealed to Moses, of whom it was said, "With him do I speak mouth to mouth. It will never be abrogated nor superseded, neither supplemented nor abridged. Never shall it be supplanted by another divine revelation containing positive and negative duties. Keep well in mind the revelation on Sinai, in accordance with the divine precept to perpetuate the memory of this occasion and not allow it to fall into oblivion. Furthermore, we were enjoined to impress this event," meaning the revelation on Sinai, "upon the minds of our children." I want to read a little more, even though I didn't include it in your course reader, but the next paragraphs I think are very important. He continues, It is imperative, my fellow Jews, that you make this great spectacle of the revelation appeal to the imagination of your children. Proclaim at public gatherings its momentousness, for this event is the pivot of our religion and the proof which demonstrates its veracity. Evaluate this phenomenon at its true importance, for Scripture has pointed out its significance. And then he cites a verse. I'm not going to quote the verse. I'm going to skip to the next paragraph. Remember, my co-religionists, that this great, incomparable, and unique historical event is attested by the best of evidence. For never before or since has a whole nation witnessed a revelation from God or beheld his splendor. And I'll stop reading there. So what did you notice? Which principles? Who would like to pop in with? I mean, you haven't memorized the principles yet, but maybe some of you noticed. Which principles of belief does Maimonides here identify that the Jews of Yemen should teach one another? The parents should teach the kids, the teacher should teach the children, in order to strengthen their resolve to stay Jewish.
That God is one and God is unique, and that
Yes.
Moses was the only, and this prophecy, and Moses is the true prophet.
Yes. So on this list, principle number 2, God is one. Principle number 7, Moses was the greatest prophet. Principle number 8, the Torah is from above. Yes, Josh Adler, Moses as the key prophet, for sure, Revelation. Number 9, the Torah is unalterable. So these are examples. I wanted to show you how in real time in history, the Rambam used his principles in a certain way. By the way, the Rambam was successful in strengthening the Yemenite community and eventually ending the persecution. And the Yemenite community felt very indebted to the Rambam. And so I'm suggesting here that this is one of the functions of the 13 principles. Besides just giving me a handle on how to summarize Judaism, it also helps to strengthen personal commitment. Okay. Question.
It indirectly stresses that God is the creator.
Did the Rambam stress God as the creator in the epistle to Yemen? I didn't notice that.
It's God's creator is an indirect reference to one of the 13 principles that God exists.
Okay. John is pointing out that creation doesn't seem to appear on the list, right? Is that your point? Did I get that right? Creation of the...
No, I'm saying like God exists, so he also creates, but that's an indirect reference to the principle.
So the issue of creation is an interesting one. We're going to talk about it. It doesn't appear explicitly in the Rambam's list. And we, by the way, don't forget, we opened the lecture with Maimonides, Ramban, saying that creation is one of the foundations of the religion. And that's why the Torah starts with Breshit. But in the Rambam's list, you don't see him explicitly mentioning creation. So John is pointing out that it could be that creation is implicit in one of the other principles, perhaps of God being creator, maybe principle number 4. We're going to get back to that at a later lecture. Okay. So thank you for pointing that out. Now I've suggested here that one function of the principles is to strengthen personal commitment for identity, but there is another aspect of identity which isn't personal, but communal. And it could be that another function of the principles and their significance is for the community to know the identity of its members. The principles can be looked at as criteria by which the community can determine who are its legitimate members. Membership in a faith community is determined, at least to a degree, by acceptance of the principles of that faith. Therefore, the faith community sets up guardrails to ensure that its identity is not diluted by foreign ideas antithetical to the faith. Now, in Judaism, these guardrails often take the form of laws, of halachas, that exclude the non-believer, the heretic. Certain communal functions are invalidated if performed by a heretic. Ritual slaughter, shechita, acting as a witness at a wedding or at a divorce or at any other court proceeding. Writing a Sefer Torah is considered an invalid Sefer Torah if written by a non-believing Jew. These are all examples of functions that are not valid when performed by a heretic, by one who rejects the faith. So we have specific rules to tell us who falls in that category. Also, by the way, the Jewish faith grants certain privileges to its members. For example, you can't charge interest to a fellow Jew, but you can to a non-Jew. Also, if you encounter a lost item that belongs to a non-Jew, you're allowed to leave it be. But if it belongs to a Jew, and there are ways to tell, then you're not allowed to leave it be. You have to take care of it and return it as if it were your own, as if it belonged to a family member. These privileges are not extended to people who do not identify with the faith. So we have to have a list of criteria that determine the identity of somebody who belongs to the faith, not only for my own personal commitment and sense of identity, but for communal standards. So that's an additional function of the 13 principles. Now I want to go on to one final fourth function, and I'm going to call it salvation. Salvation is not a word that Jews use a lot. It's a word you hear more often in Christianity, but it's also a Jewish idea. Judaism has a concept of the afterlife. And while the afterlife is not a day-to-day concern of Jewish practice, the afterlife is a significant part of our faith. The Rambam himself identifies his list as requirements for meriting the afterlife. And I want to read this with you, okay? I promised Ricky I would get to her question, but I was being overambitious because I don't remember offhand what it was or if we've gotten to it yet. Ricky, could you remind me what your question was?
Basically, if these principles are just the foundations, but then we have to add to them, or if they're all inclusive in order to define us as
right.
Jewish.
Good. I thought you okay. So this text we're going to read is going to address your question, but we're going to get to it soon. Okay, it's not the first thing we're going to see in this text. Okay. So this text is a continuation of Rambam's exposition on the 13 principles in his commentary to the Mishnah. After he lists the 13 and he tells you about them, he gives a summary. And this is what he says. He says, when a person believes in all of these principles and his faith in them is clarified, he enters into the category of Israel, meaning of the Israelites. And it is then a commandment to love him and to have mercy upon him and to act with him. Obviously, these are all him or her. This is true for men and women. To act with him according to everything which God, may he be blessed, commanded about a man towards his fellow regarding love and brotherhood. There are a lot of Jewish laws about brotherhood, and anyone who believes in these 13 principles merits that brotherhood. And even if he does what is in his ability from the sin, that's an awkward translation. The proper translation, what he's saying here, even if a person uses their abilities and capabilities to sin instead of to do mitzvot, because of desire and the overpowering of his base nature, he is punished according to his sins, but he has a share in the world to come and is only considered to be from the sinners of Israel. So, Ricky, this does actually directly address your question. The Rambam here, there's a couple of things that need to be unpacked from this summary at the end of the 13 principles in the Rambam's writing. First of all, the Rambam adds that these 13 principles. First of all, he says that they're about membership, belonging to the people of Israel, and this is the one I had just mentioned a moment ago about the community having standards for who belongs. But he also says that that these 13 principles are the criteria for meriting the afterlife, for meriting a share in the world to come. And perhaps surprisingly, he says that they're even more important in certain ways than the mitzvot. It sounds this way because the Rambam says that even if the person sins, as long as the person believes in the 13, then they will merit the world to come. However, I do want to warn you that when the Rambam says that, he says, as long as the person sins because of desire and the overpowering of his base nature. And what the Rambam means by that is if the person sins because they just don't believe in the Torah or they're rebelling against God, well, it's almost impossible to do that without violating the belief system. Because if you don't, because how could you believe that God gave you the Torah and say, but I'm not going to keep it because I don't think I should. But the Rambam here puts the 13 principles of belief on a very high level, that they're the criteria by which somebody merits the world to come. So this is a new function. And I'm just going to read one more sentence, and I'm going to tell you that this sentence is both frightening and troubling, and it's going to require elaboration. So consider that your trigger warning. Okay, so the Rambam continues, the bottom of the page here. But if one of these principles becomes compromised for a person, behold, I have to move myself, right? Behold, he exits the category of Israel and denies a fundamental dogma and is called an apostate, a heretic. Here's where somebody mentioned the word min. That's the Hebrew term apostate, and apikores is the Hebrew term for a heretic, and someone who cuts the plantings, a kotetz banatiot, meaning somebody who cuts down a sapling. And it is a commandment to hate him and to destroy him. And about him it is stated, do I not hate those that hate you, O Lord? Okay. Now, I know that the modern enlightened ear does not like hearing our religion teaching us to hate and destroy people outside of our group. Who likes seeing these kinds of things? Anti-Semites. Anti-Semites love finding passages like this and then claim that Judaism is a supremacist group. In fact, just a few weeks ago, a certain anti-Jewish and anti-Israel commentator, whose name I will not mention, presented on her show a bunch of nasty things she claims the Talmud says about the Jewish attitude towards non-Jews. But of course, she made a terrible and slanderous error. All Jewish texts that govern our behavior and our attitudes are vetted through a tradition of interpretation. You cannot assume that every written word in our books represents actual practice. You need to check with how the Jewish community has accepted and interpreted those texts in real time. Sometimes those texts are considered only a parable. Sometimes they represent a position that was never accepted. And sometimes those texts refer to a specific context that is not applicable in a contemporary situation. So, not today, but another lecture, I think it's the third or fourth lecture, I'm going to devote to discussing the interpretive tradition on this passage. And spoiler alert, we do not today, as a rule, hate or seek to destroy deniers of the principles. But as I said, that's for another day. For today, the main point here is that we discover in the Rambam a new function of the principles beyond strengthening my personal commitment, beyond delimiting standards for the communal membership, and that is meriting the afterlife, the world to come, or as I called it, salvation. I hope with your permission, because this is the first class and Rabbi Sachs gave some introductory words, if I can go a little bit over time. I do try to end at the end of the hour. If you do have to leave, you can hear the recording, but I do need a few more minutes to get to a good stopping point. I want to say that the two questions I raised here are related, meaning what are the principles? Are they foundations or beliefs? And what are they for? And the various options could be interrelated. So, for example, if the main purpose or function of the principles is to facilitate conceptual organization, to encapsulate what Judaism is in a small number of principles, then what the principles are is going to be foundations or fundamentals, the defining things without which Judaism cannot stand. On the other hand, if their main purpose is educational, to help people to commit to their Judaism and to resist assimilation, they don't necessarily have to be the fundamentals or the foundations. They could just be principles. Now, it doesn't have to be the case that the two questions are related, but one could make this argument. And in a later lecture, I think we're going to return to this question, but not right now. I just want to pause. I do want to take another 5 minutes, if I may, to set up the next lecture, but I want to pause just to see what kinds of questions have come up here. Looking here at my, will the slides be available? That seems like a good idea. Yes. Yes, so I commit to doing that. Lieneder. Yes, Josh Adler, yes, the Rambam directly connects being a Yisrael to belief. It sounds differently than orthoprax. Yes. Well, the Rambam is certainly not orthoprax. The Rambam is orthodox, although that's not that's not historically the term that would have been used. But he believes in orthodox in doctrine, in religious doctrine. Could the 13 principles be equated to the Christian creed? John asks. I don't know enough about the Christian creed, but this is actually, I'll address that in a moment. Yeah. Okay, it's an interesting point about this anti-Semite also claimed we're Sabbatians. Interesting. Okay, fine, Nathan. Good point. Nathan, you have a question. You say yes. No, I see Shmuel has a question as well. Go ahead first, Nathan, and then Shmuel.
Oh, Baruch Hashem. It works funnily, this thing. Yeah, the question was, there were always all kind of different Jews. And I mean, before they got paganized, I think that when the Rambam says that the mean cannot write a Torah, he means Christian that would write it and that would still believe it, but in another thing. So how would he react with all kinds of people who were just after him, but had, Kabbalistic beliefs, or had not the pure Jewish belief?
The Rambam would evaluate anyone who had what you're calling a Kabbalistic belief by his 13 principles. It's not obvious that Kabbalistic beliefs would contradict any of the 13 principles. It depends on the Kabbalist and what they particularly believe. There are certain Kabbalistic beliefs that if they're taken literally, they sound like they contradict the principles, but some Kabbalists don't take them literally. They take them figuratively. To get into those, I think, would take us a little far afield. But the answer to your question is he would evaluate each case on a case-by-case basis according to the principles. Okay, Shmuel, you wanted to ask a question? Yes, Shmuel, did you want to ask a question? Did I get that right? Or was it somebody else? Okay. Okay, so I just want to set up the next class meeting next Sunday at the same time. I mentioned at the beginning of today's class that some people have questioned the existence of specific doctrines in Judaism, claiming there aren't any, and that Judaism is a religion only of action. And one of the pieces of evidence that they give is that before the Rambam lived in the 12th century, but before the Rambam, we don't find such a list in anyone else's, at least not in the canonized literature, not in the Mishnah, not in the Talmud. Somebody wrote, I read somewhere, that the fact that we don't find a list of principles before the Rambam is an indication that the rabbis didn't think that beliefs were important enough to mention them. Now, I don't think that's a good argument. The fact that the rabbis did not systematize belief in a list doesn't mean they didn't think they were important. Rav Aaron Lichtenstein points out that the rabbis did not systematize moral principles in a list either. That doesn't mean that they didn't think morality was important. There are philosophers who systematize a list of moral principles, and rabbis didn't do it. But of course, we know they thought they thought morality was important. The fact that they didn't systematize a list may just be because they thought that the beliefs were implicit in the keeping of the mitzvot. But the fact that we don't find a list like this before the Rambam does raise a legitimate question. It's legitimate to ask, where did the Rambam get this list from? Where did he get the idea from that violating these beliefs forfeits a person's olam haba? So that's going to be something we're going to deal with in the next class, in the first half of the next class. It has to do with the Mishnah in Sanhedrin, which you may have seen. But how the Rambam got his list is an interesting question, which has some interesting theories, and I think I'm going to leave that to the next class. Okay. So if there are any questions, you have, I guess, a minute for if anyone wants to send me an email or a WhatsApp with questions, that's also acceptable.
Take away messages. Take home messages for this session, please.
Say that again, please.
Take away messages. Shura tachtona in proper English.
Take away messages. I don't know what that means. You can control. I think you should be able to control message. Why don't you write to support@WebYeshiva.com and ask them if you're finding the messages interrupting. Ask them what you can do about that. That's a technical question. I don't have an answer.
No,
to.
take away messages is מה עלינו לקחת הביתה מהשיעור הזה. I'm sorry.
Okay, now I get what you're saying. You want something to take away with you.
Yeah.
Right. How's about I throw that question to the group? Somebody tell us something that you're taking away with you from this lecture that you think is something meaningful. Just in one sentence or so, please. Don't be shy. We're all learning together. No one's taking anything away. Josh Adler says, "You got to believe." Okay. Okay. I'm gonna call on my mom. Yes. You have to unmute yourself 1 second, or either you do it. I'm gonna unmute you.
We all are not perfect, and sometimes are afraid of lapsing. And I think that having a list that we should memorize is a good way to keep from doing that and to strengthen our Judaism.
Sounds good to me. Anyone want to add anything to that? Yeah, Ephraim?
Yeah, I think just one of the basics is Maimonides didn't write HaEmunah Shlema. I think that's a paradigmatic shift in how we're taught from day school or yeshiva to today.
Okay. It may be that if we learn the Rambam, what he'll say will be even more intense than Emunah. Actually, all I said was he didn't use that language. We're gonna have to see what the Rambam actually says. But I'll put your point on hold. But it is an interesting point. Yes. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'd like to say that I think just the Rambam had a groundbreaking movement here where he came up with these principles. However, I guess we'll learn how he came up with them, but the fact that he systematically listed them, it must mean that he felt a strong need for something like this in Yahadut, and it's something that we carry with us till today. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Okay. Because the hour is late, I'll allow one or two more comments if anyone else wants to say anything, and then we'll call it a day.
Toda, thank you.
Anybody else? Did you want to say something? You wanted to add something, Ephraim?
Yeah, the also he's dealing in a world where we're spread out. So the idea that one of the functions is to not just to know who's in our communal boundaries, but in a city, but we're talking about disparate nations or disparate geographical locations.
And this list would unite everybody. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, Shmuel. Yes.
All right. Yes, sure. Yeah, I thought it was just interesting to see the view challenge that Judaism is just about mitzvot. That in fact that there are beliefs which are fundamental to Judaism, without which Judaism potentially is it. The Torah falls, as you say. We know the person is not practicing Judaism if they're just practicing. They don't have the necessary beliefs.
Yeah. Okay, folks. I want to thank you all for joining us. Good lesson, and I'm not complimenting myself. I'm complimenting you. It was a good, enjoyable lesson, and I look forward to seeing you all at the same time next Sunday. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay.
Oh, you can just end the meeting.
Yeah. Okay.